Good morning to all. Now we request Professor Raja to welcome the gathering and to introduce the guest speaker, Ms. Somastri. Raja sir, please.
Very good morning to one and all present here. It is great pleasure to introduce Ms. Somastri Rai Chaudhary. She is a prestigious alumnus of our college, KCG College of Technology. She completed her BE in the year 2011 and she is pursuing her integrated MS and PhD at IIT Madras. She completed 6 projects, out of which the optimization of hydrogen production from steam reforming of ethanol on plate type measurement microchannel system is our present PhD work. She has published 6 papers and 2 papers are reputed international journals and other 2 papers are under preparation and 6 papers in international conferences, out of which 1 paper is awarded as a best paper award. She is having this work experience as a teaching assistant at IIT Madras. She has undergone implant training at Konakoya Power Steering Systems and Rane Brake Lining Limited. And with a lot of co-curriculars and extracurricular activities, it is very great pleasure in inviting you, ma'am. Welcome. I'm welcoming you all others and participants for the webinar program. I'm welcoming you all once again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such kind words of welcome. So good morning to everyone. So shall I start with my presentation? Or
Before your presentation, madam,
yes,
one important instruction to the participant. If you have any question, please put your question in the chat box. So at the end of the session, there will be a discussion. Thank you. Madam,
yes,
you can start. You can start your presentation.
yes, sir. So today I'll be giving my lecture on computational fluid dynamics. It will be basically answering some of the very basic questions like what is CFD, why do we need to look into CFD, and how do we solve a problem using CFD. So in this presentation, I will basically give a very fundamental understanding to CFD. I will not be going too much in depth, and I hope that by the end of this session, it will kind of pique the interest of all the students to go in depth into it and find more interest in understanding the subject. So the first question, the first question, sorry, just 1 minute, please. Yeah. So coming to the first question, what is CFD? So CFD is a computational tool that we use to solve any kind of transport phenomena equations with respect to fluid mechanics or heat transfer or chemical reactions in any kind of system. So for an example, we may have one F1 car and we want to basically look into the aerodynamics of the F1 car because of course, at very high speed, it is very essential that the drag force acting on the F1 car is much less. Only then it can actually move at a very high velocity. So to study the aerodynamics of the F1 car and design and streamline the body accordingly, we can do something similar with respect to our fighter jets, or we can even look into a commercial planes, the design of the commercial planes, how to make them more aerodynamic, and also with the view of optimizing on our energy that we use. Then suppose we want to actually study the burning characteristics of a fuel. So suppose we have a tray in which we have some kerosene and we're burning the kerosene. So how exactly the flame behaves, if you want to study that, we can do that with CFD. And another aspect where we are finding application of CFD is in the line of medicine. So suppose we want to design a pacemaker, then we need to understand certain parameters that are especially in play inside our heart or even in any kind of blood vessel system. So using CFD, we can actually understand the flow of the blood in and out of the heart, the pressure that is acting, and so on and so forth. So with that, we can actually optimize on the working of the pacemaker, and we can design the pacemaker accordingly. So these are just a few of the examples of where we can use CFD. Now, we can solve a problem by different ways, actually. We can, if we have a problem, like let's say we want to study the aerodynamics of a vehicle or a ship or whatever. So we can study it actually experimentally by using some wind tunnel or something of that sort. So we can do such experiments and figure out the parameters that are required to optimize the design aerodynamically. Or we can also do the theoretical analysis. So in theoretical analysis, what we will do is the physical problem that is there, we will try to formulate them in terms of certain mathematical equations, and then we will solve those mathematical equations for certain initial and boundary conditions. So that is another way of doing it. And the other way of solving a problem is by numerical analysis. So here again, we will take the physical problem. We will actually represent it in the form of certain mathematical equations. But instead of solving it like we will do for a theoretical analysis, we will solve it iteratively here. So using iterations, we arrive at the solution. So CFD is basically a numerical analysis where we iteratively solve for the mathematical equations and we arrive at the solution. Now, why do we actually use CFD? So CFD gives an in-depth understanding with respect to flow patterns, which are very difficult to study experimentally. Also, what happens is if you want to set up an experimental setup, of course, we have the expenses with respect to first purchasing everything, fabricating everything, then the measurement devices, the sensors, all those are very expensive enough. And after that, if you want to post-process as well, depending upon whether you want to do basically just normal, if it's just normal measurements like using thermocouple or pitot tube, then it's not that expensive. But if you want to basically go for a high-speed camera and then do flow visualization studies, then high-speed camera becomes costly. So you can understand that experiments is actually a costly affair. But when you go for CFD, all you require is a computer. So the expenses is that of a computer. Then if you're using a software, the license, you need to procure the license. So these are the only two costs that you have with respect to CFD. So CFD makes it a little less, basically it is cheaper in comparison to the experimental techniques. Then, of course, in CFD, you can actually study various quantities, various parameters. In experiments, you have limited number of parameters that you can study at one time. Then in CFD, of course, you can study any kind of problem. You can actually use various kind of operating conditions and simulate various types of problems in much lesser resources, that is just your computer. And finally, of course, solutions from CFD are much faster than obtaining solutions from experiments. Because of course, in experimental study, you need to first set up your experimental setup, then you need to do your measurements, and then you need to post-process your results and then come up with the necessary graphs and everything. So in CFD, on the other hand, except for the time that the computer will take to run your simulations, and you can actually get your CFD results very fast. It doesn't take as much time as that of your experiments. So this is why CFD is advantageous. Now, where do we use CFD? So I've already shown you a few examples earlier. A few more examples include, of course, design of aircraft for less drag, high safety standards. Then space engineers can use CFD for better shuttle design, satellite design. Architects actually tend to use CFD for designing a comfortable and safe living environments. By this, what we mean is most of the buildings these days, commercial buildings these days are having centralized AC. So if you want to actually study how is the temperature distribution inside the room, whether anywhere you are having proper airflow or not. So all these kind of design, the comfort and everything you can actually design using CFD. Then, of course, I've already spoken about vehicle aerodynamics. Then coming to the chemical engineers, whenever they are doing some chemical reaction study, if they want to actually maximize the yield of the reaction, with respect to the equipment or with respect to the design of the reactor, they can also use CFD to study such problems. Coming to petroleum engineers, they can actually use CFD to come up with some optimal oil recovery strategies at these oil extraction plants. I've already stated the application of CFD in the medical field, be it heart or be it the vein. CFD can be used to even kind of study the cell tissue that is mutating into cancer and so on and so forth. Then meteorologists also use CFD to forecast the weather, then warn us about the natural disasters. There are certain health risks involved with respect to radiation, be it thermal radiation due to high temperatures or even nuclear radiation. So all these things can be studied using CFD, and the safety experts can actually come up with the standards that are required. Military organizations can develop weapons using CFD, and they can estimate the damage that these weapons can also do. And of course, how do you think our computers are getting smarter and our mobiles are getting smarter? That's because of the better design of computer chips. So this also we can actually obtain by using CFD. And finally, showing all these colorful graphs, you can, any CFD practitioner can actually make big bucks. So that's why we use CFD. Then now, how does CFD make predictions? So let's get into that. What are the main components of a CFD design cycle? So first, of course, we start off with a human analyst. A human being will define the problem. Basically, what are the flow parameters that we are looking at? What is the geometry exactly we are looking at? So this is what is defined by a human being first. Then, of course, we need the scientific knowledge. If the flow is laminar, then we need to use a model corresponding to laminar. If the flow is turbulent, then we need to use the model corresponding to turbulence. So these kind of scientific knowledge is especially required to express these things mathematically. Then, of course, we require a computer code. You can write the computer code, or you can actually use these commercial softwares, CFD packages, which compute these mathematical models. Next, of course, computer hardware is very much important. Now, I'm sure all of us have played computer games, and we know how painful it becomes when your games get stuck because your computer is not able to handle it. So it is something similar with respect to CFD as well. The more complex your CFD simulations become, you need such strong and powerful system as well. So hardware plays an important role with respect to that. And of course, finally, it again comes back to a human being who will inspect the entire simulation that's happening. And once the simulations converge, interpret these simulation results. Main thing what I want to state with respect to CFD is that CFD is a highly interdisciplinary research area. It is an interface between physics, applied mathematics, and computer science. So if you have a basic understanding of all the three, you will find usage of CFD much easier. So how does CFD work? CFD works in 3 steps basically. First step is preprocessor, then the next step is solver, and then the third step is post-processor. So coming to the first step, in a preprocessor, what we do is it's actually a user-friendly interface where we provide all the inputs, like what is the geometry we want to look at, what is the problem we want to actually simulate. So this is what we define in a preprocessor, and we feed it to the solver or the computer. So what does a preprocessor exactly do? Define the geometry and the computational domain, grid generation. Then suppose we are looking at an unsteady problem. So what is the time step size we want to take a look at? So this is something we also define here. But if you're looking at a steady state problem, we need not worry about this step at all. Then, of course, the mathematical model that we are looking at for the different physical complexities of the problem. Next is the definition of the fluid properties. Is it going to be air? Is it going to be water? Or is it going to be a mixture of some other gases? So these are some things we need to define. Then, of course, we define the boundary conditions and the initial conditions to the problem. And With this, we finish the pre-processing. So getting into geometry and computational domain in much more depth, we all know there are two types of flows. One is external flow and one is internal flow. So depending upon the type of flow, actually the geometry and the computational domain defined are a little different. So for external flow, let me just state that I wish to simulate, let's say there's a cricket match going on and Kohli hits a six. And I want to really simulate that ball and check whether that ball is going to reach, like go out of the boundary and reach six, or the drag acting on the ball, the air drag acting on the ball is so much that the ball will actually slow down and it will only fall down for four. So I want to simulate something of that sort. Then what do I do? So what I do is the ball is my geometry and my computational domain will be something around the ball so that I can simulate the drag. But when it comes to internal flows, we need not, it's not so complicated actually. With respect to internal flows, suppose we take a pipe flow. We are having a flow of water through the pipe. Then the pipe in itself becomes the geometry and the computational domain. So to just recap with respect to this, the external flow has geometry separately, and the computational domain is actually defined around the geometry in such a manner that the physics that's happening around the geometry can be captured. But in internal flow, the computational domain and the geometry are the same. Now, moving on to the different types of grids that we actually use on the geometry and the computational domain. We have the Cartesian type, we have the curvilinear type. So these two type of grids are actually called a structured grid. Then we have unstructured grid also. Here I've just showed two types of unstructured grid, but there are plenty more types of unstructured grid that you can venture into. Then after we have defined the grid, it is important to understand what are the different mathematical models that we will define into our problem. So suppose we are looking at a physical problem where with change in with change in time, we are having change in physics. That means it's an unsteady problem. We cannot define it to be a steady problem. So this is an important aspect we need to understand and accordingly define. Then, like I said, with respect to the problem where I want to simulate the ball being hit by Kohli, suppose that day is a very hot day and the air is very dry. That means it's a single phase problem. I have only air which is in gaseous phase. But suppose that day is a very wet day. Then what do we exactly have? We have a multi-phase problem. Why? Because we have moisture in the air. So this is how we need to define whether we want to go into single phase or multi-phase. Then we have the different types of viscous models. So when we are looking into the viscous models, of course, we are looking into certain equations. When we are looking at an inviscid problem, that means we are saying that we are not considering any viscous terms at all. So we are essentially solving Bernoulli's equation. But then if we want to consider viscous problem, then we look into laminar and other turbulent models. So these are the models accordingly. Of course, each model has its own equations to be solved. So based on what you exactly require, like for example, in a turbulence model, if you're just fine with studying a flow at a far field, you are not very much concerned about the flow that is happening nearby the wall, the boundary layer that is developing nearby the wall. You're not very much concerned about that. Then you go for K epsilon. But suppose you want to look at that boundary layer, then you go for K omega, SST model, so on and so forth. So these equations, maybe you can take a look at. Each one of them has certain specific set of equations it solves based on what you want to study. Then, as I said, radiation. If you want to look at thermal radiation, you enable the radiation model. Then if you want to take a look at reaction, like for example, I want to take a look at a flame. So flame is like considered to be a volumetric reaction. So I will enable volumetric reaction. But suppose I have some other reaction which is happening at the surface of the catalyst, then I will enable surface reaction. Now, acoustic model, you will enable like, for example, you're having a plane flying far away, somewhere high up in the sky, and you're able to hear the plane, the sound from the plane. So you want to kind of like model at what speed it's moving, and you are so much far away. So how much time the acoustic is taking to travel to you. So if you want to model something of that sort, you can actually use acoustic model. Of course, this is just one of the examples to make you understand, but there are plenty more applications. Now, other inputs for CFD includes fluid properties like density, viscosity, then the boundary conditions be it wall or symmetry, axisymmetry, slip, no slip, then the inlet conditions like temperature, velocity, mass flow rate, pressure, etc. So now that we have defined the preprocessor, we will be moving on to solver. So in a solver, what we essentially do is that we take the governing equations, we discretize them, and formulate certain a system of algebraic equations. So these system of algebraic equations are basically solved in the CFD commercial packages, which are like a black box to us. Now, of course, if you are not very much concerned about discretizing it yourself and formulating these algebraic equations, you need not know much about what is exactly going on in the black box. But if you want to have a control, if you want to understand whether the solution that is coming out of the black box is wrong or correct, or if you want to define certain, sometimes there may be some problems that you may have to solve. The code may not be converging. So you need to define some set of parameters called as under relaxation factor. So which you should define, when you should define. To understand all this, it is important to understand, at least have a basic understanding of what is exactly going on in the black box. So coming to the discretization, the most basic method of discretization is finite difference method. So in a finite difference method, the partial differential equations are defined in the differential form only, and they are expanded in the form of Taylor series. They're expanded using Taylor series. So suppose we have a grid, as you can see on the right-hand side, and if I want to basically find expand the equation dou u by dou x plus dou v by dou y equal to 0 for a finite difference method, at I comma j, then this is the equation it will look like after discretization. Now, finite difference method is the most basic method. From finite difference method, we have obtained finite element method and finite volume method. So finite element method, I remember having studied during my BTech curriculum. I'm sure you all will be studying that during your BTech curriculum, so I will not touch upon that. I'll be moving on to finite volume method. So both finite element method and finite volume method are actually integral form of the PDE. In finite volume method, what we do is, suppose we have a grid. Now each grid, as you can see, the square geometry over there, each square geometry is considered as a cell. Now let's have a flow through this, through the boundary of the center, the cell at the center. Let's say the flow in the horizontal direction is represented as U. The flow in the vertical direction is represented by V. So the flow in the horizontal direction is UW or U west. The flow out in the horizontal direction is U east. Similarly, in the vertical direction, flow upward is V south, and flow out of the boundary in the vertical direction is V north. So what we will do is we will use conservation equations like conservation of mass, conservation of momentum, and ensure that all of the equations are conserved. The physical parameters are conserved within each cell, and only then the information is passed on to the next cell. So as you can see at the bottom of the screen, the equation, this is basically a conservation of mass. So the conservation of mass for that cell at the center can be represented in this form. Now, the advantage of finite volume method is that it is very flexible with respect to geometry. You can use any arbitrary geometry to study using FVM, and you can study for any fluid phenomena. Also, as I've stated already, it is mainly used to, it is directly relatable to physical quantities like mass, momentum, and so on. So that is the advantage of finite volume method. Now, what is discretization process? Discretization process is nothing but we convert a system of PDE to a set of algebraic equations by generating a mesh, which may be a structured or unstructured. So in here, we can play around with the mesh size, be it coarse mesh, that is big cell size, or be it a refined mesh, that is small cell size. So this is how we can basically play around. Now, of course, the mesh will actually define the space discretization. If we want a high order approximation or high accuracy, we tend to go for a refined mesh. If we want low order accuracy or low order approximation, then we go kind of like our coarse mesh. Now, suppose we are actually looking into an unsteady problem, then obviously we need to look at the time discretization as well. So when we are looking into this, certain mathematical schemes need to be taken into consideration. So there's something called the explicit scheme, there's something called the implicit scheme. Then the mathematical, since the math contains both space term and time term, so there'll be some stability constraints that you need to take a look at. Then there's something called local time stepping, the adaptive time step control. These are some things that need to be taken a look at when you're actually looking into an unsteady problem. So I'm not going deeper into the mathematics of this, but if you're interested, you can definitely take a look into this. Now, what are these partial differential equations that we are exactly solving? So we are looking into conservation of mass, conservation of momentum, conservation of energy. If you're having reaction, conservation of species, and so on and so forth. So these are the governing equations that we solve in any system. These governing equations can be in integral form or differential form. Of course, in FVM, we are defining them in an integral form. And what we do in FVM is for every control volume, the set of equations that we have formulated, we will combine all of them into simultaneous non-linear algebraic equation in the form of AX is equal to B. So this non-linear matrix equation we solve using various matrix algorithms like Gauss elimination, Gauss seidel, line iterative process, alternative directional implicit, strongly implicit scheme, conjugate gradient methods. Now, based on the type of equation that you're using, the type of accuracy that you need, the type of computational time you're willing to spend, actually, that is what will define which solution algorithm that you wish to choose with respect to your problem. So there's no hard and fast rule that you have to stick to one of these. You can actually use any one, but that will be defined by your own constraints. But with everything said and done, the most important thing that everybody needs to consider is the convergence criteria. Now, when you have a solution which is changing with respect to iterations, what you will do is you will formulate the error suppose you have an iteration n and you have iteration for n minus 1. So you will compare the two and you find what is the error between the two. Generally in academia, the error is taken to be considered to be 10 power minus 4, and in research field, the error is taken to be 10 power minus 6. So this is called as the convergence criteria. Now, you will keep iterating your solution till you reach this convergence criteria. And that is when you will actually say that your solution has converged. So until then, you cannot call your solution to have converged. Now, when we're coming to a solver, how does your computing time for any flow simulation, what exactly defines the computing time for your flow simulation? So of course, the choice of the numerical algorithm that you have used, that defines the computing time. Then the convergence criteria that you have used, the mesh quality that you use. If you use a coarse mesh, actually it takes much lesser time. If you use a refined mesh, then it actually takes much more time. Then of course your time step also, if you have an unsteady problem. Then apart from that, if you are programming it in some programming language like Fortran, C, C++, depending upon your code, it can take lesser or more time. Then I've already stated how hardware is very important with respect to the computing time. And yes, apart from hardware, if you are taking a problem and you're running it on serial processor, or if you're taking a problem and you're running it on a parallel processor, then the parallel processor will be much quicker. So the parallelization also defines the computing time. Apart from that, how do we look into the quality of the simulation results? So again, the mathematical model does define the quality of simulation, and then the assumptions that you have actually used to define your solve for your mathematical model, that defines the quality of the simulation. The mesh plays a very important role with respect to the quality of simulation, because if the mesh is coarse, your quality of the solution may not be that great. But if your mesh quality is high, the solution gets better and better as well. The time step is similar to that of mesh only. If the time step is small, then your solution may get better. If the time step is actually kind of like, sorry, if your time step is kind of, yeah, if your time step is very small, then you kind of like get better solution, but it takes more computing time. If your time step is like very large, you're actually computing it very fast. The time is kind of, the computing time is small, but the results may not be that good. Then of course your convergence criteria plays a major role in the quality of simulation. Now coming to the final step, post-processing. The post-processing is of course our most favorite part, because that is where we find such colorful fluid dynamic pictures. So how do we exactly arrive at such beautiful pictures? So what is the process that we go through in post-processing? In post-processing, we take the simulation results from the solver and we convert it into the desired information. It may be calculation of stream function, vorticity function, lift, drag. It may be representation of the data in the form of a straight line like a plot, XY plot, or a 2D contour graph, or a 3D cut plane, isosurfaces, or we can have arrow plots, which I'll also show you later on. We can even have animations. So these are some things we do in post-processing. Then apart from that, you can actually derive huge amount of data and use statistical tools to basically do systematic data analysis. And finally, if you are writing a code yourself to solve for these equations, then how, if you get stuck, how will you know basically how to debug your code? So this is where you need to post-process a little, see how your results are turning out to be. Then you will understand where to go and debug. And after debugging, let's say that your code has run successfully and you are getting results. How do you verify your results? So how do you verify that your code is actually giving you correct solutions? So this is where you validate your solutions, so your results, with some experimental results that are already available. So this is what we do as part of post-processing. Coming to the more or less end of the presentation, I wish to actually give an introduction to the softwares that are already available with respect to all three steps in CFD. So for preprocessor, we have Gambit, we have ISEM CFD. Of course, now Gambit is not being used much. Now people are preferring ISEM CFD more. But these two softwares can be used for modeling purposes, and it can also be used for drawing the required mesh that we want. So once the geometry, the computational domain, and the meshing has been done, this is fed to a solver. So the solver can be ANSYS Fluent, it can be Star CCM+, it can be CFX, it can be OpenFOAM, it can be COMSOL, or you can even write your own code and solve for those equations. Now, after the solution, after the equations have converged to the required convergence criteria, we extract the data from the solver and we post-process them. Post-process as in we actually represent them in the form of graphs or plots. And that is where we can use MS Excel, TechPlot, Origin, SigmaPlot, MATLAB, so on and so forth. So let's just come to an example of a simple CFD problem. Maybe you can try it on your own in any kind of CFD package as well. Let's consider a flow between two parallel plates. So essentially, it's a two-dimensional problem. It's a two-dimensional geometry. Let us also consider that there's a square geometry at the sitting on the bottom surface of the on top of the bottom plate. So this kind of structure is called as a rib. And what we are going to do is we are going to pass air from the left of the geometry to the right. And we are going to see how the flow pattern will be when it flows over the rib. So let us, we can define any kind of velocity. We can take about 1 meter per second, 2 meter per second, whatever you wish to take it up. Let's not get into very much complication. Let's take small value of velocity so that the velocity is still in the laminar flow regime. The inlet boundary condition will define it to be velocity inlet. The outlet boundary condition, we can define it to be pressure outlet. And the walls of the parallel plate, the ribs, everything is defined to be no slip condition. This entire geometry we can simulate for ambient temperature and pressure. That means we are not looking at any temperature effects. So essentially the equations that we will solve for this kind of geometry with these conditions is conservation of mass and conservation of momentum. But suppose instead of ambient temperature, let's say we are simulating for a temperature at 600 degrees C or 800 degrees C. That is when we have to enable the conservation of energy as well. And for simplicity's sake, you can simulate this for steady state condition. Also, since we are taking air as a fluid medium, so we can safely assume it to be in ideal, we can safely use ideal gas equations to solve for the fluid properties. Then you can use, once you have solved, you can actually draw any kind of mesh you want for this geometry. It need not be structured. You can use structured, unstructured, whatever it may be. You can use any kind of CFD package and do the simulations. And once you're done with the simulation, you can extract the results. Then you can plot some XY plots like this. So on the left-hand side, figure 1 is basically the velocity profile. That is like inside the pipe, in between the two parallel plates. The flow hasn't yet reached the rib. So the flow pattern is seen to be parabolic as shown in figure 1. But once it reaches the rib and it flows past the rib, how the flow pattern is varying is something you can plot using XY plot. You can also plot contour plots like this, which is a two-dimensional plot. So you can extract the pressure values from the solver, and you can actually plot a contour plot like this. You can plot it both in the solver. These days, Fluent, StarCesium Plus, all these actually provide a post-processing module as well. But for better representation, we tend to go for TechPlot, SigmaPlot, and so on and so forth for contour plots. Then this is actually the vector plot. So you can especially look into the velocity plots, how the velocity is basically like how are the velocity profiles. So this is using a vector plot, you can take a look at that. So finally, at the end of my presentation, what I wish to share is that it is actually good to know a software, a CFD software, because of course, these days with respect to placement or when you actually come off to higher studies, it's not compulsory, but there is a certain expectation that you may or may not know our software. If you know our software, it's better. This may be with respect to FEA also, it can be with respect to CFE also. But more than you just knowing the software, the main expectation that companies or even in higher studies that they have is that you understand what is going on in that black box. Nobody is expecting you to be a thorough master of what's going on in the black box, but you should have an idea of what's going in the black box. Because when you are defining a certain problem to that black box, is the solution that's coming out, is it correct or not? You will not realize this unless and until you understand what is exactly going on in the black box. So with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Madam, there are a few questions in the chat box.
Yes, sir.
One question is from Crescenta, our student.
Yes, sir.
Is asking about the Euler equation does not have a viscous term either. So why is Bernoulli's equation used instead of Euler's equation for an inviscid model? That was her question.
Okay, yes. So actually, Bernoulli's equation, I have just stated, okay, an Euler equation can be applied to any kind of flow, but when you have a flow along the streamline, that is when you actually use Bernoulli's equation. So Euler equation is a generic form. Bernoulli's equation is more specific. And yes, as you said, it's actually Euler equation that is mainly used. Suppose you have a flow which is completely streamlined, that's when you can use Bernoulli's equation. How to differentiate streamlines and streak lines in CFD.
How to differentiate streamlines and streak lines in CFD? Okay.
So streamline is nothing but okay. You need to understand the definition of streamline and streak line. So streamline is basically the flow field, how the each laminate of okay, each fluid is considered to be like a layer over the other. So how each laminate is basically flowing, that is put down as streamline. So streamline is a straight line. Now a streak line, actually, you have, suppose you are looking into, you're having certain particles which has actually, okay, you have gone from one point to the other point. That is when you want to take a look at streak line. So it's actually dependent upon the definition of the two of them. So streamline, most of the packages, what they will do is they will provide you streamline functions that you can directly extract from the solver. Streak lines, you will either take it to be path lines, or I don't think exclusively they are streak lines in the CFD package, or I haven't seen exclusively streak lines to be there. I've seen streamlines to be there, and I've seen path lines to be there separately. So from CFD, this is how you can actually extract these two.
And one more question, for atmospheric boundary layer problems, without the thermal stratification, how are the surface level turbulences modeled accurately in CFD?
Okay, so again, turbulence actually has plenty of length scales. Depending upon the length scale that you want to take a look at, you can have Kolmogorov length scale, or you can have a much larger length scale. So if you want to take a look at very small length scales, then of course you can go for a much accurate turbulence model like SST K omega. K omega, if you're not bothered much about the Kolmogorov length scale, but even then SST K omega is not sufficient enough to actually model the Kolmogorov length scale. So that's why what people tend to do is people tend to go for all these large eddy simulations or other models, so that they can actually look into such small length scales as well. But those things take a huge amount of computational time, and also the system that you require, the servers that you require, need to be that level powerful as well to handle such very complex mathematical equations as well. So if you want to model them like accurately, but you are having a constraint with respect to time, and you are not interested about the Kolmogorov length scale, you are fine with the largest length scale to just slightly about third orders less, then you can go for K omega. If you want to go further, then K omega SST. But if you really want to go much more in depth into smallest length scale like Kolmogorov length scale, then you need to get into LES simulation.
One more question from Dr. Motilal. What will
Yes.
happen if we do simulation without meshing?
Okay. By meshing, what we do is we actually discretize the problem. So simulation is nothing but you're solving a set of equations. So in simulation, what you do is you have a system of algebraic equations that you're solving using some matrix solution algorithms. Now, if you do not discretize your problem, so in discretization, what you're doing is you have your equations, conservation equation, momentum equation, energy equation. These are not in some algebraic form. They're actually present in the form of some partial differential equations. So you need to discretize them with respect to each cell, and you need to convert them into a global algebraic, a set of non-linear algebraic equation, which is basically in a matrix form. So this is what basically you do when you discretize. Now, meshing is nothing but the process of discretization. So that's why we tend to discretize.
Again, the question from Dr. Motilal. Which
Yes.
modeling and simulation software is user-friendly?
So now every software is user friendly. It's all about which one you choose. I am familiar to ANSYS Fluent. If anyone asks me to do a simulation, I would do it in ANSYS Fluent. I have a colleague who is more familiar with COMSOL. If I ask him to switch to Fluent, he will ask me to switch to COMSOL. So I feel it's upon what you are comfortable with. But presently, if you take any software, the latest version, all of them are very user friendly. You need not worry about it. It just takes you a little time to understand how to access all the options. But once you have understood all the options, if your physics is right, if your math is right, then none of the softwares actually are going to be difficult for you, sir.
Another question from again Dr. Motilal. Do we have consider boundary layer thickness while doing simulation y plus value?
Yes, sir. For y plus value, we need to consider the boundary layer thickness. Again, sir, it actually depends upon what is it you want to simulate, what is your constraint with respect to computing time, and like suppose you are looking at the turbulence boundary layer, you want to look at the laminar sublayer, then you definitely need to look at the y plus that you need to look at that variable. You need to model that correctly. You need to get your grid so small that you are able to map that y plus value accurately. And then, of course, based on that, you also need to use such high accurate models like SSTK omega. But suppose you're not looking at the laminar sublayer, you're fine with the boundary layers above, then you need not worry about the y plus so much. You need not worry about your mesh size so much. You need not get into SSTK omega because SSTK omega will take more time. You can just do it with K omega itself. So that's how it's dependent upon your problem, sir. What do you exactly want to define? What is it you exactly want to solve? That's what will define what you need to do. What are the parameters you need to fix? How do you want to go about it? What is your time constraint? This is what you need to take a look at.
One more question from Professor Kannan.
Yes.
If possible, will you be able to show a small simulation to all our participants? Is it possible now?
Right now, it will take me some time.
If possible, we can have it, or we'll go to the next question.
Okay. Is it okay if I basically show you an already simulation, or you want me to draw the geometry, put the grid, and then show it to you?
Oh, it will be more time consuming.
Yes, that's why I asked the question.
Okay, okay. No problem, madam. And I want you to suggest our students about learning the CFD, in what way it will be useful for them in future. Please give few suggestions that will be very useful for our students.
Yes, sir. As I said, actually, whether you're learning FEA or you're learning CFD, it is, as I said earlier, sir, it is good to know a software. But more than knowing the software, it is important that we understand the physics, the mathematics, that is actually going into solving that problem. Without understanding what we're exactly doing, we can feed anything. Even a layman can just feed anything into a solver, solve something, get some result out of it, plot something, and then go away. But how do we know that whatever the solver has solved, any CFD package has solved, whether it's correct or wrong? How do we know that? So for that, it is important that we know the physics behind it. We need to be, for CFD, we need to be strong with fluid mechanics, heat transfer, thermodynamics. For FEA, of course, it's important that you are actually strong with all the solid mechanics subjects, because finally, when you step out, these are the ones that actually create the foundation that you need to operate on any FEA or CFD package. Without these foundation, there's no point you knowing any software at all. So this is my advice and suggestion, that all of you please do study the foundations very well. If you have your foundations, you can learn n amount of softwares, and you can show your master in anything. And of course, with a very good foundation and knowledge in a software, I'm sure any company will be happy to take you in, because that is what they want. They want you to have the knowledge along with knowing the tools. These softwares are tools, but if you don't have the knowledge to use the tool, they're not that interested. So you need to know the knowledge. That is what I will suggest.
Thank you, madam, for answering all our questions. Now I request Professor Amrita, madam, to propose the vote of thanks.
Somashri, thank you very much, Somashri. We could see the passion with which you're working in this CFD. And as a computational person myself, I'm so glad that you touched upon the computation part and you insisted on it. And I'm also happy that you insisted that students know their basics very well to work on it. And any lay person can generally run. Yes, true. And yes, I should also add, there's a lot of pride when I look at you delivering this lecture with a lot of elan and comfort.
Thank you.
So next time around, when we probably have you as a panelist or a lecture person, probably we'll have a person who's in a higher, Dr. Somashri, who's in a higher position. And on behalf of all the panelists and the attendees, my pleasure to thank you, Somashri. Thank you very much. Thank you.